Game on here. A trade war between the United States and China is here.
Even if China were to reduce all of its tariffs, take all sorts of free trade measures, that wouldn't really boost exports from the United States all that much.
We'll make it better, or we'll have to do something else.
I don't think the trade war has been a success from the standpoint of even Trump's own goals. I don't think we should expect too much from the current round of trade negotiations because this is an election season in the United States. Of course, the Trump administration does not want a big break with China. They don't want great drama. They don't want anything to blow up. But they also are not in a position to make concessions or to make any kind of a deal that would really change the circumstances a lot. So it's a kind of holding action pending the outcome of the election. Don't expect too much until that. Even if China were to reduce all of its tariffs, take all sorts of free trade measures, that wouldn't really boost exports from the United States all that much. And of course, the decisions to buy American goods are not decisions made centrally in Beijing. They're decisions made by a lot of individual Chinese consumers and businesses and so forth who are making plans on where they're going to buy their inputs and consumer goods. And so the government does not have the power to suddenly create demand for goods that doesn't exist. And of course, the government does make some direct purchases, but a lot of the sorts of things that the Chinese government might want to buy are things that the U.S. is prohibiting sale of, arms, for example, and some sorts of high-tech equipment. So I don't really think there is a way for China to boost the exports to the level of the agreement. I don't think the trade war has been a success from the standpoint of even Trump's own goals. I mean, if you look at first of all, the overall U.S. exports to China are, of course, down. They're not up. Now, one reason for that is obviously the drastic slowing of the world economy, including China, as a result of COVID-19. And U.S. exports to China have picked up a little bit recently, as indeed the Chinese economy has also picked up recently. It's one of the first to recover from the COVID-19 depression. But that's still below the level that U.S. exports were running last year or indeed before Trump started the trade war. So if the effort is to boost American exports, he's failed. They're still below levels before he tried anything. And not all of that is because of the virus. Some of it is just because of the reciprocal tariffs that each side put on the other's goods. And then the other thing to look at is some of the key politically important exports, like soybeans, for example, because Republicans need to win the farm states. Those have been traditionally strong Republican areas, and soybeans is by far the biggest U.S. agricultural export, and yet soybeans exports to China are way down. And that's a big part of the total exports for American farmers. So this is really a big political problem for Trump. He has not delivered on the trade goals, even based on his own, metrics of what is a successful trade deal. He hasn't done it. The rhetoric around the trade negotiations is generally not very negative, let's say. It's not nearly as hostile as rhetoric in some other areas of policy. So in that sense, yes, it's a relatively moderate discussion that's going on there. And partly because there are real important business interests at stake, which Trump cannot afford to alienate. A great number of American companies do business in China, not just as exporters. This is something a lot of Americans forget. But American companies sell at least twice as much in China that they manufacture in China as they export to China. So a lot of the American business in China is actually by American companies manufacturing there. That's still American business from the standpoint of the companies that earn profits there and in fact support the value of their stocks based on some of what they earn in China. So the overall picture matters a lot to American business, and that's one of the reasons why stability in this area is important as a political consideration as well, because businesses donate a lot to the political campaigns, and they don't want to see the U.S.-China relationship, the biggest trading relationship in the world, disrupted for political reasons. One of the things that you always see, a standard pattern that you've seen between U.S. and China for many decades now, is that during elections, both parties criticize China. I mean, I think the Chinese government has gotten used to this. It's very standard, and it's understandable because there are real differences. And there are some issues in which American people don't sympathize with China very broadly. So both parties can gain a lot by using criticisms of China, but that doesn't necessarily translate into action because both parties also have to face the fact that China is the world's largest trading country. It's the largest trading power in the world now. It's vital to the economic health of the world economy, and it can't be isolated. And so we have to do business. We need to do business in ways that are fair and effective, but we do need to do business. And both parties know that. And so once back in office, they have to, negotiate with that reality. And some of the rhetoric will drop away. That doesn't mean there won't be problems. And I think in particular issues like Hong Kong, like Taiwan relations, like the South China Sea, have gotten more problematic in recent years. There's no doubt about that. But I also don't think those are the issues that are most important to most Americans, or indeed to American business, which has such an influence in the political process and in the policy process. It's easy to proclaim a Cold War, and you see a lot of people doing that. But as I say, it's a war of words. And we've seen a lot of wars of words in politics. One of the biggest issues there is the tremendous impact of the COVID-19 virus on the world economy, and especially the American economy. And Trump, of course, doesn't want to take responsibility for that. He wants to pass the blame to China. Well, that's clearly not justified because many countries did get information from China about the virus, responded quickly, and kept their death rates low. The United States got the same information, didn't act, and has one of the highest death rates in the world. And so the responsibility for that clearly rests with the administration that didn't act promptly and effectively enough to stop the virus the way many countries did around the world. But in order to deflect blame for that performance, Trump almost has to find a scapegoat. And of course, the obvious one is China, because that's where the outbreak of the virus first became widespread. But I don't see this as the outbreak of a Cold War. It's a blame game. It's a word fight of the sort that are very common in politics, but it doesn't translate into the kind of Cold War that the U.S. had with the Soviet Union. One very, very big difference between the real Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet bloc and what people are now calling the new Cold War with China. In the real Cold War, there were almost no U.S. business interests involved with the Soviet bloc because there was almost no trade between the U.S. and the Soviet bloc until the 1970s with détente and the opening of, for example, the wheat sales to China. And then it did become a political issue, and in fact, U.S.-Russian relations improved as soon as trade opened up, even a little bit. U.S.-China trade is extremely important to both countries. And so regardless of what else happens, that trade is going to keep going, and I think it's going to be essential to the recovery of both countries as we emerge from the COVID-19 crisis. So I think the big difference between the real Cold War and this war of words is that the U.S.-China business relationship is really quite deep and profound in a way that the U.S.-Soviet relationship was not.